Hello everyone. Today I am here to show you guys three different Unchained deck profiles. Now, before we get started with the deck profiles, I'm going to be talking a little bit on the analysis of what's going on in the OCG metagame, and just to kind of break down the deck and kind of show you guys where I think it stands in the current meta and in the future when the cards do get released in the TCG and in Master Duel as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the quick little analysis here. In the OCG currently, Unchained sits, I would say, at a very decent level. I feel like a lot of people, I myself, didn't really see Toon being that big of a representation in a lot of tournaments. I know that a lot of people take a look at the Osaka regionals that happened, but a lot of people don't know that that was also a best of one. So when you hear like Toons and Toons FTK, usually they kind of point at that tournament. But because it is a best of one, it also kind of conflicts things because here in the TCG, all of our events are a best of three. In Master Duel, you can make a completely different argument with that. When the cards do come out, Toons might be very prevalent. But currently, as it stands in the TCG and probably looking at the future, I feel like Toons will probably continue to dominate because it's still a really good deck. And the FTK, while was very prominent at that tournament, I think it will fall out of favor just because I do know historically the only really good FTK that stick in the meta are those that are able to do it like turn consistently, and without really many interruptions or through interruptions. But now that we have so many kinds of hand traps, especially in the TCG, we have availability to like triple impulse, for example, and we're not afraid to fill our decks with like 15, 20 hand traps. I feel like the FTK version may not be that big of a threat, but the normal Toon deck might still be competitively viable. And because of that, I feel like a lot of people in the OCG are not looking at Unchained. I do know that there have been tops utilizing the Unchained deck. There's a few in Korea and a few in China, from what I could see. There hasn't been, too many tournament reports that I have seen myself that come from all of those regions. But the ones that I have seen, I've seen like top six, top eight Unchained finishes. So overall, I do think the Unchained deck is here to stay for the future. But whether or not it's a tier 1 deck, that is a bit of a contender. It is currently, I feel, safely at a tier 2 status. It is very rogue, and I do think that a lot of that has to do with two major things. The first one is that the deck itself is very technical. And by technical, I mean that there's a lot of plays that you can do, there's a lot of lines that could happen, and there's a lot of interruptions, but those interruptions only matter once you understand the deck you're up against. And in this age and day and age, there's so many decks out there that you could be playing against. And so a very skillful player, one who actually understands the Unchained deck, will perform extremely well in those tournaments, in that setting. But those who are just picking it up because they like the cards or they only have like casual play with the deck may find themselves struggling a lot more finding why this deck could be good. And I understand that because the deck itself is not an easy deck to really master. Like, it's super easy to pick up, really hard to master because of all the little technical plays that you can do with the deck. It's very adaptable, and the more like range you give it, the harder it is to focus on everything that it can do. And the second part is seriously the meta. Currently, as it stands in the TCG, again, I kind of mentioned this in one of my previous videos, but I do believe the deck could potentially be tier 1 in the current state. But looking at the future with the upcoming decks, people are going to have their eyes on Toons. And Toons are going to be a very playable deck. And on Chain, I haven't really done too many like plays against, like a matchup against Toons. But from what I can notice is a pretty even matchup. Especially depending on how you build a deck, because in the OCG, in those OCG deck lists, I feel like a lot of players are not maximizing on their starters, and they're also not maximizing on their hand traps. They do have different ban lists, so maybe there could be something over there that I do not know because I am not an OCG player. But that's kind of like what I've noticed. And for the future, I do think that this is a safe deck to pick up if you are willing to put in the time to master it and to play with. But in any case, I'm just gonna. That's kind of like the end of that analysis, and I'll go ahead and gonna get started with the deck profiles themselves. So, the three deck profiles that I have here for you. One of them is a pure Unchained. One of them is a turn zero like type of deck that you want that kind of utilizes the turn zero plays. And then the third deck profile is more of a Fiendsmith version. It's more like an Unchained with Fiendsmith engine, and rather than like an Unchained Fiendsmith with like a lot of the combos that Fiendsmith are known for. But in any case, go ahead and get started here on the advantages and disadvantages of each one of these decks. So the first one here, the pure Unchained deck, I would call it like a cookie cutter kind of Unchained deck profile. We are playing, one Kimura, one Disaster, double Shabara. This could change to triple Shabara if they unlimited in the TCG, and in Master Duel you can always have three. I put two Saramas just because I feel like if you do end up having this up to three, you can just replay one Sarama with the Shabara and it wouldn't make any differences in the rest of the deck. But in any case, double Shabara, one Yama. We're playing one Ogre Shara here, and we're playing triple Shima as your new starter. We're playing triple Aruha, double Sarama. I mentioned why we played two, Rakia, and that's it for like the Unchained monsters. Then we have the non-engines here. We have triple Ash, triple Full Wallows, and we're playing one Vistil, one of each of the Vistil, the Druid Swarm and the Magna Hut. I'll talk a little bit more about this here after I'm done talking for the rest of the cards. We are playing triple Prison, double Reincarnation, double Trust, one TTT, triple Imperm, triple Impulse, and one of each of the traps. And then for the extra deck, we are playing one Mudcracker, one SP Little Knight, double Rage, double Yama, one Abominator, one Anguish, one Abao, one Loriyama, one Abomination, and one Underworld Goddess. And then we're playing one Baguska and double High King Caesar. So let's go ahead and talk about this deck, its advantages, its weaknesses, and why I built it the way I did. So starting off, this deck here, I mentioned before, it's like a cookie cutter type of Unchained deck, where anybody could take this deck and change things around if they want to pretty easily. There's a lot of empty slots that this deck you can make it into adding more hand traps, more board breakers, or even more engine pieces if you really wanted to. As it stands, this deck does have a lot of starters. We have the triple Abominations Prison. We are playing the double Reincarnation, the triple Shma for the one card combo. That gives you 8 targets, plus all of the 2-card combos that you can have with Aruha, Shabara, and even Kimura with any of your spells and traps. So this deck is very consistent. It really is. Like all 3 versions of the Unchained are going to be basically the exact same consistency, just with maybe different ratios of cards. And then this version of the deck, also because we play less like Ogres, less Kimuras, we play like almost like the minimum package of the Unchained stuff, you can utilize a lot more non-engine cards, such as your hand traps like Ash Blossom and Wallows. And if you look at the count here, I am a believer that if your deck cannot play more than 12 hand traps, then you need to reconsider your deck building. I like to have at minimum 13 to 14 hand traps in every deck I try to play. If I cannot do that, 12 is the bare minimum I'm willing to accept, but 13 to 14 is my minimum that I would like to have my deck to have in hand traps. And in this case here, if you can count, we have 14 hand traps. We have the triple Ash, triple Full Wallows, triple Imperm, triple Impulse, making that 12, plus one of each of the Bestials. And the reason why I added the Bestials here, this is a more or less a meta dependent call. There are in different metas, decks that utilize the Lights and Darks that are easy for you to utilize these 2 cards. Like currently as it stands, Branded is very popular. Cool Tune is very popular as well, and in the future you have Toons that are also going to be very popular, and the Vistils here just do decently well against all of those decks. So it's something you got to think about when you're looking into the future. And also because they're level 6s, you can also even make a Caesar during your turn, much easier if you're able to summon them up throughout the combo or even earlier, or maybe not even utilizing one of your Unchained level 6s, because they do carry the Unchained Soul tag. That's very important when it comes to comboing. But in any case, I added those two just because I felt like they were probably the most impactful hand traps outside of, like, well, Draw and Lockbird, which we don't really want to play that much because of Impulse. We couldn't afford Full Wallows because we're just gonna shotgun it going first, or we're gonna discard it, going second. Oh, sorry, we're going to discard it going first or utilize it going second, and it will not conflict with Dominus Impulse. But a card like Droll could, in fact, conflict a little bit, just depending on the sequence of cards that the opponent could play. But in any case, so that's kind of it for that initial here. Let's go ahead and talk about why I'm playing Double Reincarnation. So this is a searcher for your searcher, right? It's a very good card in that sense, but overall the card itself is very weak. It doesn't really do what you really want to. You can combo with it. You really can. Like in my previous video, I showcased how you can combo with Reincarnation and even Wailing if you want to play that. But in all reality, the card itself, I wish it did more. I really do. And for that reason, I cannot afford this to be playing in any more numbers than 2. If I draw it, I see it, great, that's another consistency piece. And then if I know that my opponent does not have Droll, then great, I could utilize it to set it from the deck using Shabara. Because the main problem with this card is that it does not play well around Droll or through Droll. It loses you pretty hard if you get Droll after you activate Reincarnation. And the same thing could be said with Prison, but in Prison's sense, in case, you can actually set this card and then destroy with one of your Unchained effects. And that's why I like Prison a lot more, because it has that tagline, if this set card destroy, summon an Unchained from the deck. While Reincarnation does not have that tag. And I hate that for that reason. And I wish it had that tag, and if it did, oh my gosh, this card would be so much better for the deck. But sadly, it is missing that tagline, and so I cannot afford to play any more than 2 copies. I mean, 8 cards for a 1-card combo is still very consistent, with a bunch of like 2-card combos that you can just open up with in regards of your game. And then on top of that, I do play the Double Thrust and the Single Tactics. So these cards here are also flex slots. This could be anything. This could be 3 more hand traps, or they could be different go second cards. They could be kaijus. They could be I don't know, like the Dole draw spell card that pops the card, draws 2. They could literally be anything in the game. But the reason why I chose these ones is because, I mean, first of all, Attracted Thrust gets you into your Tactic Talents for going second. And going first, you can set any of your Unchained spells on traps in case you didn't draw them. And in case you get like Ash Blossom or something and you feel like you need one of the spells, one of the traps, then you go ahead, activate that, set like Chamber, and then boom, pop it, and get your combo going. Or, at the end of your combo, if you can still play through the interruption, you just set an Impulse or an Imperm, and then you basically have an extra interruption available for you. And this deck could really utilize Triple Tactic Thrust in that sense. But again, this is more of a flex slot, so you can do whatever you want with it. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the 3 different trap cards, because each one of the trap cards here are very unique in a way that you don't have to play all 3 of them. You don't. I've seen some deck profiles that only play 2 of them, and the ratios of them cannot depends on you as a player. What do you value more? I myself like to value all 3 on what they do, but in my honest opinion, I honestly think that Syncretism is probably the weaker card. Like, it's weird to say that because they're all strong, but I think it's the weaker out of the 3, even though it has a very powerful effect. And mostly because you're required to use an Unchained Link monster, so you can summon another Unchained Link monster, and in some situations, that's not gonna happen. While the other 2 just requires Unchained in the graveyard or hand, and an Unchained on field, so you can destroy a card on the field. Like, both of these activation conditions are a lot easier to meet than Syncretism, but it's still a very good card. And again, depending on how you want to play the deck, you can shift around different numbers. You can do, escape and secretism, or even chamber and escape, and call it a good day. But I like to play all three because I like what all three brings to the deck, and I am not suffering in this particular deck for any space whatsoever, right? Like I have 3 flex slots that I decided to use my triple tactic talents on, while still keeping 14 hand traps and keeping a decent number for the combo to succeed in every game. So that's gonna be it for this version of the deck. I know sometimes some people want to play cards like Cross-Out Designator and Call by the Grave when it comes down to Fuwalos, and I do like Call by the Grave and like Cross-Out Designator to counter Fuwalos, but I myself I'm not a big fan of both of these cards, especially when you just draw them and they don't do anything. Like I don't know, to me like they just not the best card I want to have in my deck, especially if I'm don't know if I'm gonna win the die roll, right? Because going second, these cards become a lot worse compared to a card like Triple Tactics, where I feel like going first or second, I still feel like I'm getting something out of it. I know sometimes, I mean, I know this is very dependent on what your opponent does, but I just feel safer having Triple Tactics Thrust than having Cross-Out or Call by the Grave. But that's just me, my personal preferences. You guys could do whatever you want in your deck profiles or whatever you guys want to play. But in any case, this is going to be the end of the pure cookie cutter Unchained deck. So let's go ahead and move on to the second version of the deck. This one, like I mentioned before, it is a turn 0 type of deck, where it tries to utilize the turn 0 plays that the deck has access to now. And what I mean by that is Ogre Shara is able to summon an Unchained or a Fiend monster to the field and destroy a card on the field at the same time. And as a lot of you know, when you summon Kamura and Kamura is destroyed, it destroys all monsters on the field. It creates a dark hole effect. And if you summon like any Unchained monster, you can, summon Abominable from deck, so you can destroy a non-targeting effect onto your opponent during the turn 0 as long as you open Shara. So let's go ahead and first talk about the deck profile, and then I'll move on to like more specifics. So this deck contains 1 Unchained Soul Abominable, contains triple Kamura, double Shabara, same logic as my previous one. We have double Sarama here, so if this ever comes to 3 or you're playing Master Duel, you can just swap 1 Sarama for 1 Shabara. But in any case, double Shabara, 1 Shijama, triple Shara, triple Shma, triple Aruha, double Sarama, 1 Rakia, and that's it for the Unchained monsters. And then for our non-engines in this version, we're gonna play the triple Ash, and we're gonna try out this new card here that is coming out pretty soon in the TCG called Multiplying Karibo. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a bit, but we're also playing the Detonating Karibo to go along with it. And that's it for those monsters. And then for the spells, we are playing the same ratios, triple Prison and double Reincarnation as the previous deck profile. And then for the spells and then for the trap, we're playing the exact same ratios too. We're playing triple Infinite Impermanence, triple Impulse, and one of each of the trap cards, Escape, Chamber, and Secretism. The extra deck is also the exact same thing. Nothing really changes for the pure version here. You can always switch and swap different cards. Baguska is not really an essential for this deck, so you can always take this out and add something that you yourself feel like you might need more than Baguska. I just added this here because it is a nuisance, and because you are playing a Link deck, you can just play into Baguska pretty easily. But in any case, so that's it for that deck. Let's go ahead and get in depth about this particular deck. So, this version of the deck has one really good thing going for it, and that is that it can play during your opponent's turn during turn 0. And that is done with Shara here. So I explained it a little bit earlier, but I'll explain it again. Shara has the effect that you can discard it, you can summon a Fiend onto the field and destroy a card on the field. Most of the time, you are going to want to have Kamura in your hand alongside Shara, so you can create a Dark Hole effect during your opponent's turn. And if you don't have Shara, you could summon one of the Unchained little guys monsters, so then you can summon Abominable from the deck and then destroy a card on the field non-targeting. So this version of the deck actually is very interesting theory, because when you look at the ratios, right, we're trying to maximize our turn zero plays here. But the fact is that you are probably not gonna get your turn zero play as often as you might think. So when you look at what the percentage of having a 3 of in your deck is about 33%. However, if you want to see what are the odds of having two different 3 of cards in your deck, that number becomes a little bit more susceptible to like RNG, because now you're looking at like a 15-ish percent odds of you having open a Shara plus the Kamura. When you look at like the rest of the cards here, like Shema, Aruha, Sarama, Rakia, I mean the odds go up, but they don't like go up by any means. Like they go up by like maybe 5%, right? Like the odds of you actually drawing something that you want to have onto the field, it's there. It is definitely possible, but it is not something that you're going to rely heavily on. Like I want to say realistically, you might see it once every 3 games, maybe even 4 games, to have some sort of turn zero play. If you're just looking to having a Kimura Darkhold play, the odds are even lower. They're like maybe 1 in every 8 games, 1 in every 10 games. You're going to see an opening hand where you have Shara and Kimura at the same time. But then why do I build this deck? Well, the thing is though that having a turn zero play that is as powerful as a Darkhold is something to think about. It really is something, because you're like, if I can get this off, it actually possibly could win me the game just on the spot, right? Like 1 in every 10 games you win a game just because you open the right cards in your hand, while still possibly comboing in the next turn. Like it just seems really, really good. And even then, if you don't have this, you can still have a non-targeting destruction with Abominable. And even though a lot of people say you are using a lot of cards for this, and you are, the good thing about it is that Shara could be recyclable, so you're not really losing advantage, but it does feel awkward when you have to discard another card for the effect of Abominable, for example. And in this deck, the reason why we are playing the ratios we are is because we want to maximize on that. And then the other reason is here that might be a little bit sus for a lot of you is the multiplying Karibo, because I have seen this card being utilized in the OCG to some extent. It's not the most popular hand trap, and I wanted to try it out in this deck in particular because there's two actually really nice thing about this card. The first is a fiend, and the second is a dark monster. So it plays really well with Impulse, and it plays really well with Shara as well. So for those of you who don't know what this card does, let's go ahead and explain basically what the purpose of the deck of this 2 card here are, right? So Multiplying Karibo essentially says that when your opponent activates a monster effect or they declare an attack, you get to special summon a Karibo from the deck or hand, or even a Dark Magician, but we don't care about that. We just care that it summons a Karibo, right? And it summons itself first, and then when your opponent attacks or activates an effect, you can summon a Karibo. So sorry, it requires your opponent to activate 2 monsters effects first before you can even summon one from the deck, because the first one is to summon and the second one is to summon one from the deck or hand. But in any case, the target we want to summon is Detonating Karibo, which reads that if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can equip this card to that monster and their effects are negated. And a card like this is just really, really good, right? It's a negate. The problem with the card here is that it requires your opponent to basically activate 3 cards before you can have a negate. And 2 cards before you get the negate, let's put it that way. Because the third one is going to be negated if you decide to do so. Which, it is a little bit slow, right? It's not immediate, but it's something that, because in a deck, your opponent is always activating effects. You are probably bound to have it, hopefully before they make something that could kill the Multiplying Karibo before you activate it, or something along those lines, right? And the nice thing about this card, Multiplying Karibo, is that you can even summon it from the graveyard, I believe, the card. So it's always something that is alive as long as you have the copy Detonating Karibo in rotation, whether that's in the deck or in the graveyard. And so that's kind of like it for that. I am play testing it to see how good it works. And let's talk about like the fiend tag here, because I mentioned that it's very important that it's a fiend, because first of all, like half of your chains here, like the main guys, Aruha and Shma, lock you into fiends. So if you want to negate, multiplying Karibo could incitate that, because it's a fiend. You can summon it and get a negate regardless. And then a card like Shara could also combo with the Karibo here. And if you remember, or for those of you who don't know, in my first video that I posted, the hour-long video talking about different Unchained combos through like Imperm, Nibiru, and Droll, in that video, I have 3 different Shara combos. One that plays without interruptions, one that plays through Yama, gets Imperm, and one that plays through Nibiru. And each one of those decks, you are able to play it while utilizing Shara plus any fiend in the game. It doesn't matter what fiend you have. If you have an Unchained, you can always extend further a little bit and you could have a better, end board. But I utilize a random Kosaki to showcase the combo, what you can do with a random fiend and any spell or trap card. You can still end on basically your entire board. Just like that, because you don't really care about the name, you just care that it's a fiend and summon a monster with the spell and traps that you can destroy by the effect of Shara. So those of you who are not familiar with this deck that I just talked about, go ahead and go back into my first video and look for the Shara combos that I posted, that I have in that. I believe I have a timestamp so you can quickly get to those points or get to that part of the video. But back to the deck profile itself, I do believe this deck here does suffer from not having too many flex spots, because this deck is pretty on board with the turn 0 plays. And the nice thing about, kind of maximizing on the turn 0 is that you are playing Kimura and you are playing Abominable, and both of these cards are really, really good at board breaking. A lot of people still get caught off with damage step Abominable, and especially against cool toons, they get destroyed with damage step Abominable. It is crazy how much they lose just because of this card. And then this card, if you just set in your spells and traps, you can, draw cards, destroy cards on the field. Like, you can do all sorts of things and manage to break a board. So this deck does do really well into boards. This is why this is a turn 0 deck, because it utilizes these cards to create a better, turn 0 when you're in a game where you go second. There we go. I managed to say it. So yeah, like this deck does really well going second, and it still does really good going first, because you do not actually lose consistency, because you're still playing the exact same, your 8, 1 card starters with your remainder card that you can utilize to make 2 card combos. But in this situation, you are a little bit more consistent, because you are now playing 2 more Kimuras, and you are playing 2 more Sharas, which again you can combo with with Shara, any fiend, and a spell and trap. So the consistency of the deck does go up. But again, the weakness is that it doesn't have very many flex slots. So this deck does suffer a lot with games 2 and 3, because you do not have the liberty to choose what to take out. If you're going first, you are probably more likely going to take out some of your Kimuras, some of your Ogres, or Shara here, just to make space for go first cards. Maybe even your Karibos you might take out, right? But going second, the deck is already so good at going second. You still want to side deck cards, because your opponent is going to do so too, and you want to out whatever they have available, right? You want to, counter whatever decks they have. So in that sense, you might have to take out maybe even your Karibos, or even like some of your engine cards here, like maybe your Arujas or your Unchained spells and traps, right? Like, it becomes very awkward when side decking with this particular version of the deck. But again, it has its ups and it has its downs, just like the first deck. It has its ups and it has its downs as well. So then moving on to the final version of the deck that I made here. I made a Fiendsmith version And the Fiendsmith version, the good thing about this version is that the ceiling of the deck here becomes a lot higher. The consistency stays basically the same while adding extra power to the deck itself, right? We added more things to do essentially, right? And our end boards are more consistent with like the bigger boards that you want to end on. So let's talk about each individual card. So here, or go through the deck list. First, we have one Kimura, one Disaster, double Shabara. In this sense here, it becomes a little bit trickier to figure out what to take out for the triple Shabara in case this comes up to 3. But at that point, I just let you figure that out for yourself. We got one Shma, one Shara, triple Shma, triple Ruha, one Sarama, one Rakia, one Engraver, one Lacrima, one Nibiru, one of each of the Vestials, triple Ash, triple Fowalos, double Lock and Bird for the monsters. Then for the spells, we are having a little bit more spells here. We are having the triple Prison, double Reincarnation. We are playing the one Sink, the one Detonator, and the one Call by the Grave. We are playing the triple Imperm, and then the one of each of the Escape and one Secretism. So, and then for the X deck, let's finish that. We are playing one Requiem, one Sequence, one little SP Little Knight, double Rage, double Yama, one Abominator, one Anguish, one Lord Yama, one Abomination, one Excited Knight, one High King Caesar, one Desiree, and one Lacrima. So let's go ahead and talk more in depth about this particular deck. So I honestly feel that the Unchained deck no longer needs the Fiendsmith as much as it did in the past. I think that what the deck can do now is pretty good. So much so that I don't think you need the Fiendsmith anymore. But that doesn't mean that you cannot utilize them as an extender engine in your deck. Like, they still work really well to extend the plays and to make your High King Caesar without utilizing your Unchained if you don't want to. Right? There's still a lot of benefits to the Fiendsmith, and while I do not play like the Fiendsmith combo that you would normally see people trying to play in other decks, because here they're just like a like not the main focus, not even like the mid focus of the deck. It's just like a side focus that you could make once you get your Unchained board going. But in this version of the deck, we are playing some different hand traps here, right? We are playing the draws now because we can afford to. We're still playing the Bestials here because they're still really good into the meta. And the Nibiru here is added mostly because we are playing the Cross-Eye Detonator, because one of the biggest weakness with this particular deck is that even though it has the same consistency in the Unchained side of things, it loses much harder, I would say, because of all the different kind of hand traps you're gonna have to play through. Like Jordan Lockbird could be an issue with this deck. For Wallace is always an issue with Fiendsmith, and even Nibiru could be an issue depending on your opening hands, right? Like, I have showcased different combos that play through different interruptions, but that doesn't mean you're going to basically have different players play differently, so they'll interact with you differently. And you cannot account for all of that. You really cannot. You can only account for what you believe could happen, and when the opponent would most likely have a play, at the most optimal time. You can only prepare for that, but you cannot prepare for what anybody else can do. And because of that, we are in this version of the deck. At least we are playing the Detonator and the Call by the Grave, because I feel like they're more essential, so the combo could get through for this particular version of the deck. Another key difference here that we do have is that we're not playing 3 of our trap card because there's just no room. And that is probably the biggest weakness to the Fiendsmith Unchained deck here, is that there's just not a whole lot of room, because we do need to add the Engraver, the Lacrima, and a spell card to go along with it. And even then, I'm only playing 1 Engraver, even though we can play 3 in the TCG. Like, it becomes really difficult to add any more copies, or even add the track with the Fable. It just becomes very difficult unless you want to play like a 44 card deck or whatever the case might be. Then yeah, if you want to, you can go ahead and do that. But I believe in keeping things at 40, consistency and whatnot. And even then, because of that, like, I much rather get rid of, the Engraver and the Lacrima because they're a lot easier to come through with, Evil Storm Exotic into Requiem. Because if I wanted to add more, I will be taking non-engine cards. And the non-engine cards we have going on right here, I think are pretty good. In this version of the deck at least, we are playing 14 hand traps, I believe. Let me go ahead and double check on that. We are playing the 1 Nibiru, the double Bestial that makes 3, triple Ash, triple Full Wallows, that's 9, triple Imperm, that's 12, plus the 2 draw and lockbirds. Yep, we are playing 14 hand traps. And again, I believe this to me is what feels better to play at bare minimum 13 to 14 hand traps, and that's what we're doing here. We are playing 14 hand traps. But the 2 flex files that we are playing, the Crossout Detonator and the Call by the Grave, could also be hand traps. But again, my argument here is that this deck really wants this combo to go through. So you want to have as many ways as possible to prevent your opponent from hand trapping you in a way that destroys the deck. And then the other weakness of this deck that it has is that you do not have very many flex slots in your extra deck. I played what I like to play at bare minimum. King Caesar, I would like to have this at 2, but sadly I just don't have the room for it. Because I am a believer that you should be playing double Rage and possibly even triple Yama, to be honest. Yama is such an important card, you probably really want to play 3 of them. But I just cannot see why you would not want to play double Rage. I think now with the new cards, I think Rage is more important than anything. And I do not want to play any less than 2. I mean, if you can be, follow what people have been doing and just drop it down to 1 if you wanted to. But in my opinion, I do still believe double Rage is the way to go. But back to the deck here itself. I mentioned, the biggest, strength. The power level of this deck is a lot higher. But the problem with the deck is that it's really, really tight. That it becomes like a bit of an iffy question, like what to take out, what to keep in. And then the other problem with this deck is because of how tight it is, going second and third, or side taking, I should say, it becomes a difficult scenario as well, just like the previous deck profile that I mentioned. What are you taking out during games 2 and 3? And for the most part, you're probably going to be taking out the Engraver, the Lacrima, probably the Call by the Grave, the Designator. If you go in second, the same, you are taking out the Fiendsmith cards. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. And because you do that, that means what, a quarter, a fifth of your extra deck here becomes useless. You are not going to be able to go into Requiem, Sequence, into your Desiree, or even Lacrima. It becomes an issue, right? And that's kind of like another reason why I do not like the Fiendsmith, is side decking becomes a lot tougher to decide what to take out, because you're either taking out the Unchained or you're taking out the Fiendsmith. Like, there's no other choice. I mean, I guess you can also take out your Full Wallows or your Drawn Logbirds, just depending on the situation, but for the most part, I do think this deck is still really good. Don't get me wrong, if you want to play a version like this, that's all up to you. I think in Master Duel, all 3 versions that I showed you are going to be viable and are going to be playable. Are they going to be tier 1 in Master Duel? Probably not. Just because Master Duel has, it's more of a, like a clown fiesta, right? You don't know what you're going up against. And Unchained does really well against things that destroy you and against a lot of decks. But it's not perfect against every deck, right? Like banishing effects. Steals hurt this deck a lot, and because the Kashtira cards like Fenrir got unlimited, I've seen a lot more people play Kashtira, like a lot more. Like, it's kind of crazy how many people are playing Kashtira right now. I wouldn't say it's the most popular deck. I'll say that its popularity went out from like 1% to like 5%, maybe even 10%, right? Like, you do see more Kashtira than you used to before. So a deck like that does destroy Unchained simply because you don't want to get your cards banished. You really don't. And if you are playing a deck like this with Fiendsmiths, a deck like Ashtira just destroys your extra deck, because that's another issue, right? Like, the Cool Tune deck could also very easily destroy this deck if they banish your Requiem, for example, or your Lacrima, or your Sequence, right? Like, you just don't have anything to go into, because we're not playing the rest of the Fusion monsters that can, play into when you have your cards vanish. But that's just kind of like just the weaknesses of the deck, right? Like that's why I don't like this as much, but it's still a very strong deck. You can still make it work. You're still gonna win games. It is still not a bad deck, right? I think like all three versions, without a doubt, are all 100% at the very minimum a tier 0. Sorry, tier 2 deck. Sorry, tier 2 deck. But I think this deck has become a lot better, and I mean like a lot better, once you as the player, the pilot, starts to understand different interactions of the meta, starts to identify like different lines that you can play through when you get interrupted, because this deck does really good when it get interrupted, right? Like if you look at the second deck here, in this version, if you get hand trap like on your first Shema, if you summon it normal summon and you get Ash, you have like a lot of options here. You have Aruha, you have Kamura, and you have Jabara that you can just, okay, we're just going to utilize one of these three, pop the Shema, and still get my combo off, right? Like this deck plays really well into Ash as well. But in any case, I'm just going to go ahead and end it there before I start rambling. So I'd like to thank you all very much for keeping up with me and for subscribing. I've noticed there are some few of you who did subscribe, and I'm really happy about that. I'm gonna not too sure what my next video is going to be. It might just be me showcasing some Master Duel games, in all honesty, but I am open to suggestions. If you guys have any idea of what you guys want me to do for you, I'll go ahead and listen to those requests, and I'll try to make videos out of them. I am not the quickest because I am still working. I have a life out there, and out here, I should say, I suppose. And I cannot. I wish I could spend more time, honestly, making videos, but I do work and I am busy a lot, and I do not get enough sleep either. So I tend to sleep a lot too. But in any case, I do hope you guys do enjoy this video. I hope you guys found something interesting. If you have any criticism, please go ahead and comment below. Make sure to stay safe, and hoping that this deck, when they do come out in the TCG, they actually make a bigger splash than they did in the OCG, because I do believe we are willing to utilize the Unchained card, so maybe they'll actually end up being tier 1. Who knows? In any case, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.